Tie in here. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Account-Based Friday. And we were just talking in the green room. We've got Santa Claus with us today. He always comes bearing gifts. Wesley Lieser, who's the demand generation recruiting vice president for Versique. I'm sure your paths have crossed with Wes. If they haven't, they should pass with Wes. We're going to get into his background in a moment, but obviously he's got a touch on a real good pulse on what's happening in today's market, and really excited to have him join us today. And because of that, I had shaped this week's conversation around incentives. How do people get incented for their variable compensation, if they even have variable compensation? A lot of companies right now are going through some challenging times to get net new logos. And I fully expected when I posted this that I'd get a lot of marketers that would respond to net new pipeline. But I guess, Meg, did you have any reactions to this? And I'm going to pull up my other screen. But did you have any reactions to the poll or the poll questions before I do that?
Yes, and I'm super interested, Wes, to get your take on this. And thank you again for joining us today. I picked more than one because I think for CMOs, typically, if you're part of the leadership team, your incentives are aligned with whatever others on the leadership team's incentives are aligned with. You may have some specific things that are functional contributions, but often there are also sort of overall company level contributions that you're accountable for to make sure that everyone on the leadership team's objectives are the same, and aligned, and we're all working towards the same outcome. So, I think it depends on your level, what your answer would be here. But also I think this brings up, and Wes, maybe you can comment on this, sort of the unfortunate truth of there still being this sort of overwhelming perception that marketing's best role is to bring new leads from companies we don't already know, regardless of the go-to-market strategy, especially if it's account-based, because you already know who you want to bring in. It's more about engaging them and converting them. But yet the net new pipeline role persists. So I think, again, depends on your role, but there's also this unfortunate reality that we live and die by number of leads, which maybe was okay 15 years ago, but not so much now. Wes, would love for you to comment on this. What are you seeing, and how do you work with companies to make sure that the incentives they're offering their marketers are really in line with what marketing can do?
Yeah, Meg, and that's a really great, kind of intro. And first off, John, thank you for the generous introduction. And John and Meg, thanks for having me. What we find is, as far as, and I'll be the first person to admit I'm biased. If you go to my LinkedIn profile, it's LinkedIn, / whatever, demand gen recruiter. My background is all demand generation, marketing technology, primarily with B2B software companies. So, when it comes to what my clients are most often looking for, it's really somebody that can help, generate demand, right? And I think, in the question is, if similar to if you have a sales rep that in 2021 they were 300% to goal, and they talk about how great they were and everything like that. It's like, well, were you really that great, or were you just kind of rising tides raise all ships, and you're able to hit your quota because the economy was great and stuff like that. I think it's really being, organizations are having to cut their demand gen marketers or their demand gen teams some slack, because okay, what we want to get rid of this person to bring in somebody who we think can really move the needle. Well, how many people are really moving the needle right now? Right. And I think that's the biggest thing, that it's really an education process that, you talk about, hey, leads and pipeline and everything, worked 15 years ago. I would say leads and pipeline worked, 2-3 years ago. Right. We're just in a completely different state, economically, now than what we were. And, John, as we were talking about, in the green room, you talked about, just kind of the retention and should marketers, be incentivized for, keeping the customers that they currently have, which I think is a really great, it's a really great question to ask. I mean, the follow-up question to that is, well, what's your normal attrition look like, from a client base in general? And if you can help, and marketers saying, hey, we need to do more with less. If marketing can help, increase the attrition rate, or excuse me, decrease the attrition rate, increase the retention rate, it's something that you need to, look at as far as, overall bonuses in the compensation.
Yeah, I think what prompted was this other survey that I was looking at. We don't normally bring up slides on this, but this was data through 2021. It was primarily SaaS. And as I was noodling it, I was thinking, gosh, are we in a new era here for marketers where not all marketers, but some are really challenged to get net new logos in the door? So at the same time, 5 years ago, we really didn't have expansion or even retention as important. I mean, you could see back when SaaS was kind of evolving in the earlier stages versus now. And yeah, you kind of pass it over to CX and CS or customer marketing, and it becomes this kind of gray area. But if I'm marketing right now and it costs me so much to acquire a net new customer, is it time to ask the question, hey, should marketers be incented on a different metric other than the net new revenue? Should it be retention or expansion? But it sounds to me like I might be too far ahead of the curve on that one in terms of the thought process based on your own experience with clients.
Yeah, and look, again, I mean, I'm biased to where, I can only speak to, what has happened previously, and I haven't had, any opportunities that I've come across, at the VP or C level, say, hey, that's how we're gonna specifically bonus that position. Now, as we kind of talked in the green room, typically when you do have a bonus and it's a, 250, 300 base, plus, 30, 40, 50%, whatever it is, generally speaking, the percentage of that bonus is broken down into primarily two things, which is individual performance and company performance. Sometimes the third one, which is team performance. And so if, to that point, the expansion point, if, life cycle, customer life cycle marketing is under the umbrella of, CMO or VP of marketing, whatever, again, I can see how incentive wise, it would make sense to incent more, on expansion if that's what the overall team goal is. And I think it really if you are an organization that is compensating that way, I mean, I would say bravo, because I think it's really something where, excuse me, you're actually taking it year by year, as opposed to, just grinding the stone saying, wow, we came into 2023 saying we were going to grow 30% year over year. And, we're going to stick to that number, and, economy be damned and market be damned. We're going to keep going. I think companies that people want to work for are companies that say, hey, you know what, we came into this year, with a plan. We got punched in the face, per Mike Tyson's, famous quote. And now we need to pivot because, we still need to keep our people happy. And I think especially on the demand side, demand gen marketers are sick of what? So I miss my number for one quarter and I got to be looking over my shoulder because I might not have a position. I mean, that's a terrible spot to be in. Like, who would ever want to get into demand generation if that's the state of, who we are in the organizations that are hiring these positions?
Wes, you bring up a really important point. I think in a market like this, there's an awful lot of talent out there. But at the same time, it's very expensive to have to replace the talent you have. And it does cause disruption. And if people are leaving voluntarily because they don't feel that they're being given proper incentives or reasonable incentives, that in the end actually is counterproductive. What are you seeing in terms of and I'll ask a different question, I guess. What kinds of skills are companies looking for when they get voluntary attrition? Like, are they making changes to the rules, or are they basically just looking for an in-kind replacement when somebody chooses to leave?
Yeah, so the thing, so that's a really great question, Meg. It really is. What I find is, companies oftentimes, and it depends upon the role. And again, the positions that I place, definitely director level and above, primarily, VP, C level, that kind of stuff. Oftentimes what the organization does is they say, okay, we need to make sure that we keep the lights on, right? So, for the short term, we're going to bring in somebody that can functionally do the position very, very well. And then what they'll do is they'll have that department report into a more seasoned leader. So, theoretically, the company or the department has, seasoned leadership that can keep steering the ship, in the right direction. But at the same time, they bring in more of like a technical expert to, row the boat, so to speak, or actually drive the boat, right? So it's kind of twofold until they do get, a new leader to come back in. And I think, a big frustration, I mean, if you look at the course of just what 2023 is, the last 10 months or so, or is I think a lot of organizations are saying because they're having budgets cut, right? And, their team of 13 is moving down to a team of 8. Well, we all know that you're still required to do the work of a team of 13, right? But they're not getting budget to backfill some of these very important positions. And they're having to replace them with somebody, again, maybe who's more just very tactical. It's very taxing on your leadership, right? Because now I'm having to do more just intricate management of some of these positions versus kind of having that director, level in there, that can manage their team and so on and so forth.
How about if you flip that model on its ear and think about it from a candidate's perspective? And just thinking about this environment right now, it kind of reminds me of, not to date myself, but when my hair was as dark as Wes's back in 2000, the 99, 2000 or 2000, 2001 implosion of .com, and then 2008 again, especially on the East Coast, more so than Silicon Valley. But it feels very similar. And I happen to be ahead of marketing at both of those junctures, looking for gigs. And I remember how challenging it was looking for that next opportunity. I landed okay in both scenarios. Like, it worked out well for me, but I remember it was a pretty stressful time. Mm-hmm. What are you seeing in terms of like what industries are hiring? What can candidates be doing now to really prepare themselves for those interviews, especially if they're maybe in between opportunities or they're not, fully employed yet?
Yeah. And that's a really great question. And my answer, I mean, as a lot of things will be, it depends. I mean, if you would have asked me this same question, what industries are hiring, you would ask me that 6 months ago, I would have said healthcare tech, healthcare tech, very big, very big boom. And I think it's one of those places where if you look back and rewind the clock into, June, July of 2022, when the first, kind of signals of a recession, soft landing, whatever you want to call it, were kind of coming out, when you look at, private equity, venture capital firms, they say, okay, we need to, let's pump the brakes a little bit, but they do need to find alternative avenues for investments, right? I mean, that's literally their job. And so a lot of them did pivot to healthcare tech. Right. And so what we're seeing now is, I mean, no different than in MarTech or, any sort of, industry that, there's going to be, 10 companies, basically do the same thing, different version of the same product, but essentially the same thing. And they're all fighting for the same market share. Well, in a fight, somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose. Right. And so you have, now what you're seeing is 2 or 3 of those have kind of come and grabbed onto that market share. And the other ones are having to do layoffs. So there is more layoffs now, in healthcare tech. But I'll tell you what, beginning of the year, because we're based out of Minneapolis and we have a lot of healthcare, med device, stuff like that, healthcare tech was keeping the lights on. It was really nice. And so that was an industry. And now that's starting to kind of wane a little bit. So as far as like what industries are hiring, I mean, there's jobs out there. I mean, there really, really are. I mean, what we're seeing now is, whether it's a push towards late in the year, there's more open positions, and I'm having more conversations with private equity firms and clients about hiring positions now than at any point in the last 6 to 8 months. So my biggest advice for a job seeker is if you've been looking for 3 or 4 months and you're starting to get frustrated, now's not the time to get frustrated. Now's the time to push. I mean, we've all seen a picture of that, the guy digging in the mine, and he's really close to the diamonds, and, he stopped, one person stops like just, inches before, a big mine of diamonds. And then the other person's, really working hard. Be that person that's not going to give up right before they hit the diamond mine. Right. And then now is the time to really push. So what you can do differently, in the conversations that I'm having and what I'm seeing from who is getting positions right now, it's individuals that are activating their network. I was actually talking to an individual last Friday, and he made the comment about how I've probably applied to 500 positions in the last month or two, and I've only gotten 10 responses. And it's like, okay, so of those 500 positions, like other than applying to the job, like what did you do? And I could tell he was like, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, applying to a position on LinkedIn is table stakes. I mean, that's like trying to sell to an enterprise company, and you send them one email and then, turning around saying, well, they didn't reply to my email. Clearly they don't want to buy from me. Like, what salesperson is going to do that? It's all of the extra things that you can do, which is activate your network. If you know individuals at the company, I mean, I don't know one company that doesn't have some sort of employee referral bonus program, whether it's 500, whether it's 1,000 or $2,000. I mean, if you worked with somebody, even if it was, hey, I worked with somebody 2 jobs ago, 7 years ago, reach out to them. Hey, I see your organization is looking for, XYZ position. I think I'm a really good fit. I've already applied to the position. I would love it if you wouldn't mind, pinging the HR person or the hiring manager, and advocate for me. And I mean, they might not really remember working with you 8 years ago, but they're also looking at it going, oh, wow, well, $2,000. Yeah, I didn't hate that person. So like, I don't necessarily remember them, but I don't have bad memories. And so, they're going to, reach out to the HR, person and, maybe bubble your name to the top of the list. And when you have 2, 3, 4, 500 applicants for every single position, it's such a cliche, but it's the little things, John, I'm a sports guy, so I'm going to, just really focus on the fundamentals and the little things. And it's repetition, and it's doing the little things over and over, which a lot of people don't necessarily do. And those are the things that are really separating the people who are landing positions, with the people that aren't. And it's tough. I mean, it really is. And I think just calling it out and saying, there's no secret sauce, silver bullet, whatever term that you want to use. If you're looking right now, just really stay diligent.
Well, and Wes, one of the things I hear from people going through, the job search process is that they're being asked to do pretty major presentations, especially for marketing leadership roles, almost to the point of it feeling a little bit unfair, especially when only one person's going to get the job, but they've gotten the benefit of free advice from however many people who have provided them with, whatever they've asked for. And it's a bit of a, darned if you do, darned if you don't thing, isn't it? Because if you don't participate, you don't get the job. But if you do, you may be spinning a lot of wheels for a role you're never going to get. What advice would you offer to people who want to make sure if they do make the investment, they're making it in a company that's really serious about hiring them? And then is there a level where it just becomes kind of nonsense and maybe that's not a company you want to work for if that's what they're asking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is Meg, that is such an amazing question. And it's something that, I would love to say that there's a right answer, but again, it's it depends situation. First question, the first scenario when I'm trying to look at data points and to understand the situation of what the organization is asking for is what level is the position at, right? So generally speaking, the lower level of the lower of the position, the more tactical the project is going to be, essentially, right? Well, with a lot of my clients and a lot of the positions that I fill, one of the things that if I'm a candidate asking a recruiter or a company, the first question I would ask is how many people are you having do this project, right? Because to your point, if they're having 5 individuals do the project, right, and they know that they're only going to hire one person, well, then there's like and if you're looking at the scenario and it's, if it's a healthcare tech company and they're saying, hey, we're launching a new product and we want to know how you would go after, XYZ healthcare organizations or, urgent care or hospital systems or something like that. What would be your approach to launching this new product? I mean, if you can look at that project and say, hey, this is clearly something that they've either A, done or B, going to do, and they really are tapping on me for advice. And, oh, by the way, they're having 5 other individuals do this exact same project as well. Then I think it's okay to say, hey, I'll do this, But at this, but at the same time, I have consulting clients as well. And so if you hire me, I'll waive my fee. But if you don't, like, I'm going to charge you, $200, $300, $400, $500, an hour, whatever your rate is, for that project. Now, by saying that, to your point, you might the recruiter say, oh, you know what, this person's being difficult. You might do this. But at the same time, I would use that as good friction as well. Because if you're pushing back on that, and depending upon the position that you're applying for, seasoned leaders know kind of the questions to ask and the buttons that they can push. And if you're dealing, if it's a CMO reporting directly into a CEO, and it's like, hey, I want you to do this project or something like that, and the recruiter goes back to the CEO and says, hey, they'll do it, but they want, if we don't hire them, they want this. CEO is going to say, okay, that's fair. I mean, if they're really interested in that individual, or if they're really not that interested in that person, they say, hey, you know what, appreciate you bringing that up, but we're not going to do that. I mean, the company is going to be more willing to bend for an individual that they're really looking to hire, right? So sometimes and look, I mean, I work in a business where I would love it if I could take what somebody says at face value, but I can't. I don't get me wrong. I absolutely love working with people, and I tell people, and I say it every day, that the best thing about working with people is working with people. The worst thing about working with people is working with people. And so it's really important to focus on what people do versus what people say. So again, make no right answer, but ask questions around, who's taking this project? Is this something that is directly going to be used by the organization, or is it more of a hypothetical, question or scenario? I mean, I do have a client I've worked with for a very long time, and he's a big advocate of projects. But the project is more of a whiteboarding session versus an actual project, because he's more focused on, is this person asking the right questions? What's their thought like, how are they getting to, like, if they're showing their work, like, how are they getting to the answer? Like, I want to see how this individual's brain works, versus focused on, they need to say A, B, and C in exactly the right order, in order for me to hire them. And then the other thing, if I'm an organization looking to hire and I'm going to use a project, the number one thing that I'm going to say is, do not give somebody an assignment unless you intend to hire that person. Because what is happening right now is candidates are getting burned because 5 individuals are getting the project. And I'll just, this is going back a really long time ago, probably 6 or 7 years. One of the first, projects that I can remember giving to a candidate. And I was talking to the co-founder at the time, and, hey, how did so-and-so do on the project? And I'll never forget this. I said, oh, actually they did really, really good, but we're not going to extend an offer to them anyways. And I was like, what? They're like, well, they would have really had to knock this out of the park and completely blow our socks off with this project for us to hire them. And I just remember thinking, like, how foolish I was at that time, and again, this is a long time ago, but how foolish I was as a recruiter to say, well, no, like, you can't, unless you intend to hire somebody, like, don't waste their time, with a project, because it's giving them a really bad experience, and it's honestly hurting your reputation as an organization.
I think you're making an excellent case here, as you're kind of sharing the experiences on both sides of the table of the pros and cons of these projects, as to why a retained recruiter or recruiter needs to be potentially involved really in any of these kind of searches. Because, sometimes people have the mental model, oh, I'll just post this job on LinkedIn. But what I'm hearing you say is you're like the hygienic check and balance. Maybe that's a strong word, but it's almost like the trainer at the gym. Can you go into the gym and take advantage of the gym membership? Can you go to LinkedIn directly and post? Yeah, you can. But with you in the middle, you're kind of keeping both parties honest here, and you're getting to that destination probably a little bit more effectively than without. So I could almost see a case for why a recruiter in the middle, because I'm sure a lot of hiring, and I remember when I was a hiring authority in companies, you're just focused on the objective. I just got to get a person in the door, and you sometimes forget that there's a human on the other side.
Yeah.
So
It's a great call out, John. And, I think, one of the things that I try to tell people is, the more, I just have a lot of experience doing this, and it really is my job to be one step ahead of everybody, just to make sure that the process goes smoothly. Because, if you really actually think about it, everything has to be perfect, for to find the right fit. They have to be, it's not only right person, but it's got to be, right time. Are they, I don't want to say it's kind of like dating, but we've all probably, met somebody, be like, oh, wow, like a different phase of life, like maybe, but, they're involved, I'm involved, that kind of stuff. And I think it has to be the right time. It has to be the right fit industry wise. It has to be compensation, right? The go-to-market plan, the evolution of the organization. So many things has to align perfectly. And, in my space, it's just having, done it so many times, there's just kind of, oh, hey, watch out for this landmine, or watch out for this, or, just advice that you can kind of give to make sure that the process, runs as smoothly as it can.
You brought up an interesting point, and I know we're catching up on time here right at the end, but you talked about PE firms having a lot of interest, and PE firms now are everywhere versus VC maybe a few years ago. I think VC is going through some digestive issues. But on the PE firms, are you seeing, or what I've noticed is PE firms still are very rooted in the lead mentality. Like, hey, I need somebody to come in here and generate revenue, and it's very coin operated, and I need X number of leads. That's my mental model. What am I missing there? Are you seeing different conversations? Are they at that level? Are they thinking about it differently about marketing? Like, what are those conversations like at a high level without divulging who you're talking to? Like, what are you seeing there in terms of the PE discussions?
Honestly, no. The PE is pretty cut and dry. Private equity is in business to make money. That's just pretty much hands down the way it is. And, I'll talk to, if I'm, and we've talked, multiple times. A lot of the opportunities that I come across are via, somebody, operating partner, managing partner, somebody at a private equity firm, and so it's pretty cut and dry. And oftentimes what happens is, the level that I work at is more of the, hey, private equity found an organization, found a company, maybe it's, 18 million, maybe it's 35 million, something like that. Maybe it's 55 million, but, founder led, right? Organization, great product, great employee base, really good customers. Okay. But they've really always seen marketing as more of an expense as opposed to an investment. And, there's a lot of low hanging fruit bringing on a marketing leader that can really help kind of propel growth. Okay. And that's a pretty typical situation that I've brought into the fold to help create. So, private equity is, when we talk about as much as like, oh, hey, the market's down to this, to that, we're not going to necessarily hit our, revenue goals. It's still pretty cut and dry in the private equity space. We're here to make money. 50% of the individuals that I reach out to say, hey, I got an organization, it's PE owned. They're like, nope, absolutely not. I want no part of it. And the other people are like, no, hey, if I'm working for a private equity firm or a private equity owned organization, it's pretty cut and dry how I'm compensated. And, I believe in myself enough, or I have no problem doing it, because if I succeed, the payoff's going to be outstanding. And if I don't, I'm going to be in the market sooner rather than later, because, private equity definitely makes decisions, fairly quickly, if you're, successful or not. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
It does. Yeah,
I don't want to be
it totally does.
Oversimplify it, but I would love it to be a more complex answer. But private equity is pretty cut and dry.
Good to know, right? Understand what you're signing up for, and if that's what it is, great. If that's not what you want, don't do it.
Yeah, and there are PE firms that are that have more of a I don't want to say track record, but reputation of, being more cutthroat than others. And I don't want to say all PE is cutthroat. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's just, know what you're getting yourself into, know what you're signing up for. So yeah, agree.
Awesome. Meg, any other closing thoughts here? I know we're right about time.
No, I think this is a really timely conversation. I think people are moving around a lot right now and have been for the last few years. So always being able to keep in touch with the people who are understanding the needs and the challenges of both sides is as John suggested at the beginning, a gift. So thank you very much, Wes, for spending time with us today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'll just kind of close with this. And I think it's something that is really near and dear to my heart. I don't mean to be, overly dramatic, but the last 3 years, 3.5 years have been just, I mean, talk about a roller coaster, right? March of 2020, world shuts down, furloughs, what's going on, everything like that. And then 2021, as marketers, the market goes crazy and stuff. So the one thing that I will say is that if you are a hiring manager looking for, to bring somebody on, the whole job hopping thing, in the last, call it, 2-3 years, definitely isn't something that I would really focus on. I think you have to understand the reasons why somebody has made the moves and look at all of the macroeconomic conditions that go into that. So there's a lot of really great people out there looking for new opportunities. And so I definitely wouldn't necessarily discredit somebody who, just because they've moved around a little bit. And if you can hear my dogs, they're agreeing with me.
Very much so.
They're saying we're at the end of time, but Wes, grateful that you came on today. Like I said, you're Santa Claus bringing gifts. So we're grateful for the gift of knowledge and all the information that you shared with us. And I think you made a really great point at the end there of companies have to have an open mind in this environment because a lot of candidates are going to be that way. It's just, it is what it is. I hope that the stigma is kind of softening a little bit over the years on that, but based on that reaction, it doesn't sound like it's softened completely. But yeah, no, I think it's a great point. But just wrapping up here, I think next week we've got Justin Sharaf, who's a marketing tech and ops extraordinaire, who will be joining us. And I may have a special co-host next week because I think Meg, you're tied up next week, but
yes, unfortunately, I can't be here.
Yeah, no worries. So we'll continue the momentum, and then in 2 weeks, Meg, you've got somebody coming on. Was it Lucy?
Yep, have to confirm, but we'll know in the next
there we go.
half an hour, actually.
Awesome, great. All right, well, stay tuned for the special guest in 2 weeks. Wes, thanks again for investing the time, and we'll look forward to connecting with everybody next.